little time lag, I think we could start. The little button in the top left is telling me we are live on Facebook, so we're going to go ahead and get going. So good evening, everyone. I am Scott Hodenstein, the president of the Democratic Public Education Caucus of Florida. Welcome to either our Facebook Live program tonight, or for many of you, you're probably watching this on a recording. This will end up on our YouTube channel, and I'm sure our panelists will share it with their audiences as well. We're here with a couple of Democratic Executive Committee chairs and the vice president of the caucus to talk about primary night, August 23rd, what worked and what did not work. And of course, there are implications for November 8th in what we talk about, and implications for 2023 and 2024. And we want to kind of gather the lessons learned and keep working so that we do better than we did on primary night, even though we had a couple of really good successes. So let me give a chance for our panelists to introduce themselves. JoAnne, we'll go ahead and start with you. Can you tell us who you are and what you do, please?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is JoAnne Devries. I'm the chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party.
Okay, Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn Moira Dictor. I am the chair of the Seminole County Democratic Executive Committee.
And our final panelist, Stephanie, go ahead.
I'm Stephanie Vanos. I'm the vice president of the Democratic Public Education Caucus of Florida.
And also the chair of our candidate and campaign committee. So Stephanie has been doing a lot of the work of going out and talking to candidates, and we've both been talking to them after the election, trying to gather some lessons learned. And that's what I want to talk about, especially with Lynn and JoAnne, because they're two DEC chairs. That's Democratic Executive Committee. So they're the party chairs for their county. And both of them had 3 school board races, and both of them had county-wide races. So lots of lessons learned here. So I'm going to ask this first question, which is, how did primary night go? What do you think?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, JoAnne.
Honestly, first of all, I want to thank the Education Caucus for all of your assistance throughout the election before the primary. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Primary night, major disappointment. And Sarasota County is a bright red county. We have a 51,000 voter registration gap between Republicans and Democrats. But we really, really thought we had it. We had 3 incredible school board candidates that should be the candidates right now, should be the elected officials right now. So a major disappointment for all of us. Honestly, it was a real heartbreaker. In all the years I've been involved with FDP and elections and with this county party, I have to say this has been one of the toughest ones I've ever had to bear with.
Can you remind everyone, or not remind, tell everyone who those 3 candidates were and what the kind of the margin of loss was in their races?
Yes, we have 3 incredible candidates. Lauren, I'm blanking out. Nora Tech, Danielle Singletary, Lauren Kurnoff. Danielle and Nora lost by 7,000 votes. I'm sorry, Lauren and Nora lost by 7,000 votes. Danielle lost by 12,000. As I mentioned, we have a 51,000 voter registration gap. So for our candidates to even come that close was amazing, but close is not good enough. and it was just so disappointing. All of our candidates just jumped in. They started campaigning early. They kept their campaigns separate until vote by mail ballots went out. They raised money on their own. They did meet and greets on their own. They wanted to just stay nonpartisan and get out into the community and not be a unit. But once vote by mail ballots went out, there was a little bit more of a group thing going on.
Now, and I know I didn't prep you for this, and I think I know the numbers, but what was Democratic turnout for Sarasota County?
We had the highest turnout in the state of Florida, 47%.
Wow.
But the Republicans only had a 41%, but they had 51,000 more Republicans. So they had more voters turn out. When vote by mail ballots were returned, our candidates were up by 9,500 votes. We had that little in bank with the vote by mail ballots. Early voting started. We still, when they showed the early voting numbers, our candidates were still ahead. Election day happened. The Republicans just came out, and our candidates, 12,000 more Republicans came out on election day. I just am so disappointed that Democrats stayed home instead of coming out. And this happens to all of us. Actually, it's a statewide thing. You know, our Democrats are voting by mail. Some are voting early, but they don't come out on election day anymore.
And I was going to say, we will circle back to that on what worked and what didn't work. I just wanted to kind of get the statistics out there where I know you said 51,000 voter registration advantage. That's like an R plus about 15 points in voter registration.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
but
no.
you
They
won the turnout game by 6 points.
Right.
So yeah. Lynn, how did it go? How did primary night go in Seminole County?
It was a roaring success here in Seminole County. For those of you that don't know, we are a small landlocked county with some of our big neighbors to the south. Orange and Osceola County are really blue. Our neighbors to the east, Volusia and Brevard, are really red. So is Lake County on our other side. That's kind of where we are to orient you to where little old Seminole County is. And for generations, decades, we have been upside down as well, a reliably red county. In the last 6 years, we have brought that deficit all the way down to 1,000 voter difference. So we are clearly purple. We scraped and pulled ourselves up by our fingernails. So there is hope that a reliably upside down county in Florida, Republican lead, can scrape your way all the way back. We now have parity with the Republicans in Seminole County. We went blue in 18 for Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson. We went blue in 20 for Barack Obama and Stephanie Murphy. All of these things. This was what Seminole County has now become. When I took over as chair 20 months ago, at the beginning of 21, January of 21, I made the school board race my #1 priority. Well, in 21, we focused on nothing but voter registration. And we actually surpassed them in 21 because we knew that if we could get close, that we could flip it, you know, and we could flip Seminole County. And within 4 months of my chairmanship, I guess, we did that. And so I knew that once we got there and we were ahead of them, then they started purging, of course, and that's a whole different discussion. But I knew that after we got close and have now been sort of, you know, seesawing back and forth, that we would have to focus on school board. We had 3 openings, as Scott described. One of them was an incumbent, Christine Krause. My #1 goal was to get her reelected. She is 1 out of 5. The other 4 are Republicans. The other 2 were in open seats. The incumbents did not choose to run again. And we had Autumn Garrick and Kelly Davis running in those 2 what were open seats. Both Autumn and Kelly won their district, won their race. They were each in a crowded race of 4 candidates. So nobody got enough, but both of them won. The #1 vote getter was Autumn Garrick. She won by 17 percentage points over the #2 person, who is a crazy Moms for Liberty lady. And then the Kelly Davis race, also running against 3 men, one nuttier than the next, and Kelly won by 15 percentage points over her #2 competitor. So it was, I think the Semdems had a lot to do with it, because it was our focus. We spent money on a beautiful piece of literature with all 3 of their faces, and their stories, and it was one side English, one side Spanish, and we walked and walked and walked for them. We sent that same mailer, a little bit tweaked, to the Democrats. Again, we focused on Democrats as the Semdems, and they knew, the candidates knew, that they had to focus on NPAs, and left-leaning NPAs at that, and moderate moms, because not every Republican is a crazy Moms for Liberty lady, right? So they knew where they had to focus, and we focused on the Democrats in Seminole County, and it worked, because we beat the Bushes. Turnout was terrible, though. Turnout was terrible in Seminole County.
What was Democratic turnout?
I don't know what the Democratic turnout was, but I know our total turnout was, was the best in Central Florida, but it was a measly 25%.
Wow.
Of the eligible voters. It was stinko. And we now had to, we obviously now have to do a major push for get out the vote coming up in the next 9 weeks, because we saw that even though we gave them a great reason to do it, so that we have a chance now in Seminole to flip this school board, because we have a very good chance of having 3 out of 5, and we are going to do it. And so this is what we scared our voters into voting this way and to turning out for these 3 people. And I am no longer afraid to scare them. I used to be really nice and but I said, we can't let those ladies take over, those crackpots take over, because they'll start banning books and burning books and not teaching history and not teaching science and all of this kind of thing. And this is our time, Seminole County. We kept saying it over and over. This is our time, once in a decade time, to flip the school board, and Seminole County responded, and they flipped it. So the long answer around there, Scott, election day was fabulous. I was walking this far off the ground for days after the election, because we set our mind on school board, and we had all 3 successfully. 1 elected straight away, Christine, and the other 2 were pushed to the runoff in November.
Yeah, Seminole County, definitely a bright spot. And I want to say that we asked both of you, before I go to Stephanie to ask her about, what else she saw around the state. I want to say that we asked the 2 of you to join, because JoAnne, I know you said that Sarasota County was, election night was a disappointment. But on the other hand, and we're going to come back to this point, having a lot of success, you well beat the numbers in Sarasota County. It just wasn't enough. And we could talk about at least why I think that is, and I could get your feedback. But I think both of you were really successful DEC chairs. And this is why I wanted to get the feedback from each of you and share it with everyone, because I think both Sarasota and Seminole did very well in getting people to get out and vote. So Stephanie, is there anything you wanted to add outside of these 2 counties? Anything that you saw, on election night?
They just did pretty well. I mean, there were some real heartbreakers on that Tuesday night, and then there were some, jump for joy, so happy that it's over, or some people have moved on. I think that there were a lot of great candidates who worked really hard and lost. And I think for even the ones who lost, I think that they still, they carried important messages, and they brought important issues to light, and they did bring people to the polls. And I would just say that, I personally made calls to those people, and I hope that we are celebrating the people who did a good job and who brought those messages out, even if they didn't ultimately win. So I do think it was just kind of a mixed bag. And the other thing I would say is, I don't think it's enough to have a Democratic, majority of Democratic voters in your county. It's you have to have even more than that to make up for the poor turnout. So I think those are things we really have to focus on.
I know that candidates, school board candidates did well in Alachua County. 3 of the 4 seats went Democratic, including Tina Surden, who was an excellent incumbent, and we really wanted her back. She's actually a leader within the Florida School Board Association. I know in Osceola, Terry Castillo getting reelected was a big one. Again, just an awesome school board member, with the best intentions for the students. Sue Waltansky down in Monroe County, and I'm forgetting a whole bunch of others, but there were a lot of successes. And I know I've gotten a little frustrated reading the newspaper about how DeSantis won big. For the people out there, and this really hasn't been nuanced or come out in a lot of the media stories. DeSantis only went into counties where he had like a 15-point registration advantage. So he could go into Sarasota County and endorse and polarize public education elections, and it would work because it's a 15-point advantage. I don't think he won any races where he wasn't expected to win. And I think that says a lot that people aren't picking up on that. And we will come back to that, but I wanted to get any thoughts about, did DeSantis actually win big on primary night, or did he show a little weakness? If anyone wants to comment.
Well, he won big in Sarasota, but like you said, when we had this voter registration gap, it was, I have to say, the Republican chair was at the supervisor of elections office. And after we saw the numbers roll in, he said he never thought it was going to be that close. But in Sarasota, Lynn, first of all, congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
We were fighting. DeSantis came in the Sunday evening before Election Day, the last day of vote by mail. Not only did we have DeSantis, we had the Proud Boys, the Moms for Liberty, and Michael Flynn, who should be in prison at the moment, but lives down here in Sarasota and is organizing. And all of these groups came together behind the scenes to help the Republican candidates. So, yeah, it was really disappointing. The one thing I feel, as I look back, there was so many lies and just so many awful things that were going on. And as I look back, I think we should have responded more hard hitting. Maybe the candidates didn't have to do it, but the party probably should have done a better job at just coming out against the lies and the deceit. So, that's just looking Monday night quarterback or whatever. That's
I think that he didn't come to our county. We were kind of lucky that way, but the Moms for Liberty lady sure did. Even one of the candidates who made it to the runoff sued our candidate with a week or two to go, which was completely diverting her attention, an effort to divert her attention away from running her race and running for August 23rd. So it turns out it was unfounded. It was dismissed out of hand, but it still was just another unnecessary speed bump for Autumn right before the election. And I will say that, so we were kind of glad that he didn't get involved here, but I do know that where he did, he got involved, or he had 30 people, right? I thought it was 30 people, and maybe he got 12 or 18 of them. I can't remember how many made it through. So I think that we were while we may not have had his nonsense here in Seminole, we sure had the Moms for Liberty ladies. As a matter of fact, there's a school board meeting going on right now in our county, and they are just awful. What kind of shenanigans goes on now at these meetings? It becomes a Trump rally half the time. They're wearing their colors, they're wearing their MAGA stuff. It's like, it's wild what's happening. And they think now they've been emboldened, Scott, to talk out of turn, to talk about our first African-American superintendent in Seminole County history. They're horrible to her. It's just all of these things. They have now decided that they want to get a toehold at the local level. And where do they get a toehold? It's on the school board. And once I saw how that was panning out last fall, we're not letting that happen here. We are going to get there. We're going to speak out, and we did it. Now the candidates were nervous about our support, which was interesting for me. They were 3 strong Democrats, and I thought, well, they're going to just rally around this mailer and rally around the literature. But they, it was a little bit of a push to get them on it, because they know, and they're correct, that they need MPAs to get elected here. So they didn't want to be so true blue, bleeding Democrat, that they would alienate those people that they needed to get to the finish line. So we talked to Democrats, and we beat the Democrats over the head with that mailer and that literature. And we said, you guys have to get out, because otherwise we're in a heap of trouble. And we just knocked and knocked and knocked. And we also called, and in addition to canvassing, we called. And I will say, I was pleasantly surprised that the FDP called in to Seminole County. I don't know if it was the Democratic Women's Caucus or the Public Education. Somebody, the FDP paid for them to call in right before, it must have been during early voting, to do robocalls to our people, to say, hi, this is Lynn Moira Dictor, chair of the SemDems, blah, 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 vote for these 3 for school board. And they did it 3 times in 3 weeks. And all of that helped us, so I don't know who was smiling down on Seminole County, but we got lucky because there was no DeSantis, hatred coming in. And, we were able to overcome the extreme themes of the Moms for Liberty ladies. And our #1 line was, Seminole County is not that extreme. And that's true. The families who live here are not that crazy fans. And we just kept saying it over and over and over. Seminole County is not that extreme. These other people are super extreme. And that's, I think, one of the big messages that worked here, at least in our place.
So the same thing happened in Sarasota, and I think around the state. I have to give a huge shout out to Municipal Victory, Rhea.
Yes.
She did an amazing job. I really was very pleased at the support that the FDP Municipal Victory gave us.
Yeah, me too.
And Stephanie, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, we were talking about it today, but there were, I think we estimated well over 100 school board races in the state, probably close to 150 if you take about half of the school board members. And, DeSantis only endorsed 30. So, I don't think it was, he had some success in the people he endorsed, but again, he went for easy counties and he only endorsed such a small number to begin with. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. They may have been some of the races that we were paying attention to, but he endorsed 30 out of probably 150.
Yeah, very weak. It was very weak, and they were counties where he knew he could win, right? I mean, he didn't really stretch himself, he didn't really go to the mat for school board, in a county like ours. He didn't go to the mat where he knew he was going to run into some Democratic opposition. So, he took the cheesy way out, which is how he's run his whole administration. So there's that.
Yeah, Lynn, and I'll just say is also just someone from Orange County, same thing. He didn't really get involved in Orange County races because he knew that, we had, lots of reasonable people and he didn't have a chance.
Right.
And I think if you look, I don't have the exact statistics. We were on like Zoom meetings while we were driving up to Tallahassee on my phone. Stephanie was driving, I was holding the phone. So, but Moms for Liberty had like a less than 1 in 3 win rate. So the more extreme you get, the more the voters actually rejected the message. And I think that transitions into, and we've kind of talked about a lot of this stuff, and that's what worked. And I think that having candidates who talked about real issues and avoided the culture war stuff. Not that culture war stuff is unimportant, but when you think about the median voter or the median parent who might not be high information, I think a lot of our candidates got the messaging right and kept the focus on the students and on funding and on what's going on in the classroom. What do y'all think about that?
I thought you were brilliant at a meeting we had last week, Scott, when you pointed out one of our school board candidates' websites needed to flip her messaging to putting students first. Instead of saying there's a teacher shortage, saying students need, you know, you could phrase it better than I, but you flipped it around. Instead of saying teacher shortage or bus driver shortage or whatever, your kids are, you know, not having.
Students don't have teachers.
Students don't have teachers, there it is. So, you know, when they put the students first in their messaging, they did much better. And they have all flipped their messaging. That's really important. And I actually thought there was another speed bump that I never thought we would run into. And it was from people who were, as you said, moderately interested voters, you know, warm and cool Dems, you know, even NPAs. We made it very clear that you could vote for all 3 candidates because it was at large. Anybody in Seminole, anybody in Sarasota, I imagine it's the same. We had so many people say, oh, I thought I would vote for Christine. Well, no, wait, no. You can vote for Christine and Autumn and Kelly.
Right.
And everything we did, it said vote for all 3 because people who are low propensity voters, they don't, you know, we get in the weeds with it, right? As the DEC chair, we're right in it in the weeds. They don't understand that. And I think that we had people say, oh, you know, they were just so, the light bulb went on. That I think was an important little, like you would think a throwaway line, vote for all 3, but it was very clear that you don't just have to vote for one person that you like. These are the 3 that will help make Seminole County better for decades to come. Vote for all 3 was an important line on our mailers and our literature.
You know, one of the things you did, Lynn, that we just could not get to happen in Sarasota was knocking on the doors. We simply could not get people to do one-on-one canvassing. We did lit drops. We did quite a few lit drops, but that face-to-face, and I know the candidates were out there, but you know, it's a large county, a medium-sized county. And that I feel truly made a difference. One of the things the Republican chair was gloating about on primary night was that they knocked 70,000 doors. And, you know, we just didn't have that capacity.
We didn't either. And it was when I say that we knocked, you know, you may call what we did a lit drop as well, because I would say maybe 2 out of 10 doors opened. But we were there and we left something in the door that said, sorry, we missed you. And we shoved that voter guide and that school board lit in every single door. So we were, you know, we were out for, I think it was 7 weeks prior. And it was Saturday in the morning and Sunday in the afternoon, although we got rained out, but we wanted to do it after people went to services if they were going to a Sunday service. So we tried to do it at different times of the day so we could catch people home. I would say anecdotally, again, I think maybe 2 out of 10 people that you knocked would answer. But when they were Democrats, we only knocked on Democrats' doors, and they were so happy, JoAnne, to see another Democrat. They were like, oh my God, thank you for your good work. You would have thought I was a first responder or something. It was so funny. They loved seeing that there's a Democrat who's knocking and saying, here's what we need you to do. And tell them what we need them to do. And they came through like champs for us. So I say canvas, but for the most part, you know, 7 or 8 out of 10 doors were just lit drop.
And I know the FDP, our regional, they were knocking on some doors for the school board candidates. So I thought that was great. shout out to the FDP. I really do feel the FDP really helped out this for the primary. Very pleased about that.
And looking at my notes, one of the things that Stephanie and I were talking about ahead of time was doing the work worked. If you did the work, then you got the turnout. And JoAnne, I got to tell you, like, you know, you keep saying you were disappointed and you came out short, but y'all did a great job in Sarasota.
You did.
Highest turnout in the state. The candidates were good. That I think they had the right messaging. So sometimes our success doesn't actually translate into victory. But it does build towards other things. And I think we're kind of jumping all over the place with what worked, what didn't work, and that's better. That's more organic. And I just had a question I was going to ask, and it just left my mind. Stephanie, did you want to comment on what worked or what didn't work? And then hopefully I could come back to the question I was going to ask everyone.
Yeah, I just actually wanted to comment on something that JoAnne said. I mean, when you talked about not having capacity for people to go out and canvass, you know, I wonder whether it was just capacity or, you know, something that we found is just the political climate. And I imagine it would be even more so this way in Sarasota. The political climate was really intimidating for volunteers. And, you know, a lot of them, it wasn't just like, oh, they didn't have the time on, you know, to give 2 hours on a Saturday, but it was, they were nervous to go out and talk to people. And so I wonder if that was something that you think happened in your county.
Definitely, definitely. We even heard at our early voting sites, you know, we had 5 early voting sites, and again, and at many of our precincts on election day, and the Republicans were so aggressive. Our volunteers were frightened. You know, they just were afraid to be at early voting sites. So yeah, you know, that is definitely, I mean, I think hopefully the FDP is going to get recruit and get volunteers knocking on doors, but I really think we need to find a way to do some paid canvassing down the road.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. You know, yeah. When I had people who were nervous about knocking on doors or taking a packet of 20 names, you know, it's their neighbors. We only asked them to knock, you know, in turfs that we knew. We only cut turfs for Democrats. So we kept saying to them, you're going to friendly doors. We're not sending you to MAGA doors. We're not sending you where there's a Trump flag or a Brandon thing. We're not sending you there. You know, we're not going out to precincts where you know, you can't find it. We're only going to Democratic doors. And that made them feel a little better. We're sending them to the family. And then they didn't feel like, oh, jeepers, you know, I'm going to get some Trumpster at the door who gives me a hard time. And if you ever felt, you know, in minivan, if you pulled up and they had some signs in the yard that made you, you just said, you know, don't even stop. Don't even. So we made it very clear. We prioritized their safety. People wore masks if they were comfortable because there were still some COVID concerns as well. And, you know, we said, knock, step back, you know, and most of the time they just left the door, shoved it into the door jamb, you know, or into the doorknob kind of thing. So, you know, we had to address the exact same concern that JoAnne had because we had people afraid to go to Trump houses, but we never cut turf for any Republican doors like that. So I think that made it a little bit easier when you could convince them to show up. When we promised them and we delivered that we did not send them anywhere that they would be unsafe.
And I think this was my question, and it's kind of a longer one. I think that in your counties, the DEC and the candidates really worked well together, where the candidates were out there with that, you know, laser focused on student achievement and what's going on in public schools. And it was the candidates who were delivering the message to the people in the middle. And I think, and I'm going to give an example in a moment, the people in the middle bought it, including a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, they,
You know, in Sarasota, when it's a 15-point Republican registration advantage and turnout, you won by 6, but they lost by 5. So, you know, it adds up that a lot of the MPAs and the Republican votes came to the Democratic candidate. In a lot, and so the DECs were driving turnout of the Dems, while it was the candidate's job to message and win the votes in the middle. And I think that worked well. And I guess that's not really a question. It's more of a statement that that's what worked well in your counties, that the DEC worked turnout while the candidate themselves were really focused on the middle. I wanted to give another example, and this one was probably one of the top 2 or 3 most crushing defeats to me personally on primary night, and that was Sarah Fortney's loss in Polk County. Sarah is a founding board member of our Democratic Public Education Caucus, and she was an outstanding school board member in Polk County. In Polk County, the Republicans, and this is lower than I expected when I looked at the stats, Republicans have about a 6.5% lead in voter registration, but in turnout, I think they had 9% higher turnout than the Democrats. But the vote totals, Sarah lost by less than 2 points.
Wow.
So it was only a couple thousand votes. You know, it was like 100,000 to 98,000.
Wow.
And if you counted, I saw the turnout report. If you counted, and it was a county-wide race, so you could kind of do this, you know, napkin math. If you added all the Dems who turned out and all the MPAs who turned out, you'd still be 1,000 votes short of what Sarah Fortney had voted for. So at a minimum, she had 1,000 Republicans come over and vote for.
Wow.
You know, again, it was just, I haven't seen the official turnout reports from Polk County yet, but if the Democrats had just raised their turnout another 3%, like from 30 to 33%, she would have won. So I think that's good news, bad news. Like, Sarah won the hearts and minds of most of the middle of the road voters. We just didn't turn out enough Dems to overcome all the Republican far right turnout. And it's tough because if we scare people too much, the middle of the road voter tunes out and doesn't show up and vote for you. But then if you don't tell the Dems what the consequences of them not turning out are, you know, that's a hard needle to thread.
agreed.
I don't know. Stephanie, was there anything else about that you wanted to say?
I guess I just, you know, about the messaging, you know, I mean, I think you covered that pretty well. I mean, I think we need to do a little bit more with awareness of NPA voters. So that's kind of what I was going to comment. I think there were a lot of NPA voters who didn't realize that they could vote for school board members. I think,
Yes.
Lynn, you did a really good job of letting them know that they could vote countywide. And maybe you did the same, you know, for just letting them know they could vote generally. But I think some NPA voters just didn't know that they could vote. And I think that was one of the reasons that there was a terrible turnout of NPA voters generally across the state.
Yeah,
It-
it's a, they call it a party primary for a reason, and they don't think they're part of a party, so why would they go? If in our county, it was literally a couple of judges and the school board. I don't know if they even had anything else. I don't think there was anything that NPAs had on their ballot. So I am sure that our candidates, when they really hit the MPAs with their literature or with their, robocalls or whatever, that they made it clear that this is on the ballot. And we also had really good success with NPAs who live with Democrats. We considered them ours. So we really hit them hard also. We probably knocked on their doors also. So it wasn't, again, wasn't a scary door, but it was an NPA door that lives with a Democrat. We thought the chances are that they're left leaning enough that they could be a positive for us. And it turns out they were.
In
I
Sarasota
know-
as well, because we're so red, we have to work the MPAs. So that's just part of what we do. We've been trying to get the left-leaning MPAs signed up for vote by mail, and we're constantly doing outreach. But it's tricky because it's always about issues with MPAs. So they might be left-leaning for, maybe the school board issue, but maybe not for Roe and Wade come November. So it's going to be a little tricky, but we really worked it.
We did spend a lot of time chasing vote by mail. And, in Seminole County, if the Democrat is not up after early voting and vote by mails are tallied, then we're sunk here as well. So we knew that we had to have a significant lead because Democrats vote early. And we didn't have great turnout. So we knew what turnout we had to lean to us, because Republicans vote on election day, and they did this time, although again, cumulatively, we didn't have a great turnout, but we knew that the Democrats must have done okay, or, obviously the NPAs did too. So you're right, Scott, we must have, like the example you gave in Polk County, we must have had NPAs come over. We must have had moderate Republicans come over, or Christine, Autumn, and Kelly would never have made it with those margins that they did.
Yeah. So here's a question. What can we do to help with election day voting? Have we gone too far as a party in pushing vote by mail, which I think everyone should vote by mail, or like I would encourage everyone to vote by mail, but have we gone too far and ignored election day voting?
So I'd love to jump in on this because I sat in on a presentation today by Dr. Susan McManus, who's just amazing in analysis. And she was saying that Democrats are concentrating too much on vote by mail. Well, I sort of have to disagree with her. First of all, yes, we are, because we can get that gap up a little bit and get those votes in. But once early voting started, once election day started, we went after everybody. It wasn't just a vote by mail. So I kind of had to disagree with what she was saying. Let's try to get everyone signed up for vote by mail, but we still have to go after those Dems that are not, and, get them out to vote on election day or for early voting.
Yeah, in any way possible, right? So vote by mail, early vote, election day. You've got three options. We had people who still don't trust the post office. So, the vote by mail thing scared people. If it wasn't there by 7 o'clock in his office, in the bin, then it wasn't counted. Even if it was postmarked, it didn't matter. It had to be in his hand, right? So we urged people, if they got their vote by mail ballot, to go to the early voting locations and put it themselves in the box. So they knew, boom, it got in there during that 1 week of early voting. We also had the least amount of options for early voting, the very minimal. You could have anywhere from 8 days to 14 days. Seminole County only had 8 days of early voting. I think it was a slap at Democrats. Very few, there were only 6 places you could go. And again, there were more last time. So they were lowering the number of places. They were, very skimpy on the days and the hours. We had, our neighbors all around us, even red counties, had many more hours to do early voting, but Seminole didn't have that. So we urged them to vote by mail. Then we urged them to drop it if you wanted to hand deliver it to a library or wherever the early voting place was. And then, but you're right, we had to urge them to vote on election day. I don't think we should turn over election day to Republicans only. It sounds like, oh, we're good at vote by mail and we're good at early, but election day comes and then we go belly up. No, we still have to do that and make sure that they know that this is the last chance before the freeway here. This is your last chance, 7 to 7 on election day. So if you didn't do any of the other early options, you better get there today because, that's kind of the last thing. Is Scott, oh, there you are. Hello.
Yeah, I'm there. So, sorry, I had to plug my laptop in. I was like, ooh, we're about to lose this whole thing. So yeah, I wanted to go off screen to plug my laptop in. Of course, now that threw me off.
So I guess the bottom line is we can't give up trying to get voters out to vote.
Right.
Try to get them signed up for vote by mail, but try to get them to vote early and try on election day. But I have to laugh because I used to love early voting. I do love early voting, but now that the Republicans come out on early voting and beat us and start closing our voter VBM gap, I kind of disliking early voting now. And I'd rather have the shorter 8 days.
Yeah. We were
had-
watching those numbers roll in carefully to see how many people were going to take advantage of the early voting at the libraries or wherever, and it was skimpy at best. But then that ultimately was a telltale sign of what was going to happen on election day. So when they tallied it all up, it was woefully inadequate. I mean, we really spent a lot of money and a lot of time getting people out to vote, and they didn't. It was only, as I said, 25%. Now in November will be bigger because it's, governor and senator and, everything else, all the constitutional officers at the state level, as well as all the local stuff. But I'm sure we'll do more. We turned out like crazy in 20, and, because it was a presidential year, we had a huge turnout here. I imagine it won't be that big, but it will be a tick down. Maybe in the 60s, 65 is my goal, or they're speculating 66% of the registered voters will turn out. So if it's anywhere near that, that's huge for us because we were 25 in this weird August primary. People aren't thinking about the vote in August,
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was, the other thing that Christine kept saying, our incumbent kept saying here, she only had one opponent. So it was a man-to-man, head-to-head, woman to woman, actually, right? She knew that whatever happened in August was the end for her. So she didn't have any way to go on. So, and she won by 9 points. So that was pretty good. She knew it was head to head and she knew she had to win it then. So she made sure that we, in our marketing materials, made it clear that, you had to turn out in August because that was Christine's only election. So yeah, it was an interesting, I asked the DEC chair of Orange County, Wes Hodge, I asked him, because this is my first go round of a midterm. And I said, what should I be doing and what should I not? What should I spend my time doing and what should I not? And he was really good about giving me some good advice. And one of the things he said is treat this August primary like a practice for November. And so, we did learn some things, Scott. We totally learned what to do, where to put our people, where to put our resources. We were kept away from the early voting doors, we were supposed to be 150 feet away from the door, but we were kept 250, 450. They kept pushing us back and back and back and back. And we had voter guides, but people didn't even see the volunteers, the SEMDEMS people standing with the voter guide because it was so far back from the parking lots. So I'm not sure that's a great, use of our volunteers and resources. We have this great voter guide and we have these great candidates, but if the Democrats don't already know who they're going to vote for, it's hard to find us at the, at the early voting locations. And election day, it's the same problem. They're pushing us back and back and back. So, I don't know if that's just our county or what, but You know, it
Well, I
was,
don't think they can do that legally. I mean, you can go
no,
up to
well,
100.
right, they can't, but our supervisor, you know, he's an issue unto himself, so. So yeah, we have to, in addition to all the other struggles that we have as Democrats, we have that.
Terrible.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So,
I think what I found that worked when I ran in 2020 was just big QR codes. You know, do a slate card, do it online, turn it into a QR code, and then you know, you could print it out and tape it to every car window driving around town, and people will like, I wonder what that is, and they'll take a picture, and it'll lead them to the slate card.
if you're leaving it on Republican windows, don't you get a lot of grief for that?
No. Like on your car, just as you drive
on my
around,
car.
have a
I
QR
thought you,
code
like, put the
taped in
slate-
your window.
That is a
And
good
then,
idea.
you know, anyone with a camera that points at it, it'll come up. You know, and you know, I think, you know, yard signs with the QR code would work as well. But yeah, with that 150-foot rule, it was interesting. Like, it's supposed to be from the door, but sometimes they interpret it that it's 150 feet from all points of the building, and you know, that makes it really kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, our guy actually even said, "Oh no, it's library property now. You can't even be on live." And I'm like, "No,
Oh
no,
my gosh.
No, that's
no."
not-
We said, "Look, once you sign up to be an early voting location, the 150 applies. You can't
Right.
like change it in the." It was awful this time, so we've got to have that hard conversation as well. I guess I do. You know, have to tell them we're not getting pushed out 450 again. That's crazy.
Wow, crazy.
I
Yeah.
think the last point I want to bring up, we've got maybe 5 minutes left. The only thing we haven't talked about, and I think this was an advantage for everyone's candidates. I think, I know certainly in Sarasota and with Christine, but it's just candidate readiness. A lot of the times when you get a Dem who wants to run for school board, they're doing it out of a concern for students or public education. And most of the time, they're not like active in Democratic Party politics. They want to do the right thing, and they're going to make a great school board member, but they don't know how to build a campaign. They don't know the systems. They don't know how to do a field plan. They might not be very good at fundraising or knowing what's going on. So
You're being very kind. You're being very kind. They don't understand any of it, and they don't even know what, when you say call time, they're like, what is that? You know, so yeah, that is definitely a hurdle. Maybe we need to do a little better at you know, running some kind of candidate training or candidate workshop or something. That is something that we learned this time, because you're right, they were well-intentioned candidates, not just for this, but for other stuff we found also. They don't know how to run a campaign. That is completely outside of their bailiwick. Yeah, so you are absolutely right. A candidate training would have been huge for us.
You know, Ruthless stepped in for our candidates. Oh my gosh, they were amazing. But I do have to say, there was also additional training going on. And you know, the one thing our candidates learned from Ruthless, that they need to raise money. And I think Nora raised almost 100,000. Danielle raised almost 150,000, and Lauren raised 250,000. This is the most expensive school board race, but all of that money doesn't make a difference when we have Republican PACs and outside organizations throwing in. That's what it's like in Florida, or in Sarasota. Just their money is unlimited. Our candidates did the work. I'm so proud of them. They did the trainings. They put together pretty good teams to help them get out the vote. They all collaborated when the party collaborated with them to let them know what the party's doing. This is what the party's doing. This is what you need to do. So, you know, this
The
should
heartbreak.
not,
Yeah.
this was a heartbreaker. They did everything right. And I have to say, Tom Edwards, who is the current school board member, now he's the lone Democrat on the board. He raised, I believe, $35,000 when he ran 3 years ago. Crazy. And now it's this money that didn't.
4 years ago, and I'll make this last comment and then give it back to each of you for closing comments. 4 years ago, when I ran for school board countywide in Hillsborough, I got 29,000 votes, finished out of the runoff. I was third out of 6. And I did it on $8 grand, of which 2,500 was my own money. It's a completely different ballgame in the last 4 years with the injection of politics and polarization of races. And that's another thing that I don't think we adapted to quickly enough, but we've kind of talked about that. So last comments, not to put you on a clock. I mean, we could go all night, but it's 7:59. JoAnne, if you had closing comments or thoughts, please share them.
So again, I want to thank the Education Caucus for all of your help. And I know you've got great plans, you know, for training and just for everything. And I just really looking forward to getting more involved with that. So thank you. So proud of my 3 candidates. They ran stellar campaigns. They did everything they needed to do. And, you know, I just have to hope that down the road that good candidates like this get elected because they care. Their message, they care about the students, the parents, and the staff. So again, you know, we move forward. You know, you have your little pity party, and then you get re-energized. So I'm hoping that all of them, once they've licked their wounds, will, you know, think about doing something down the road. So it's been great, but it's been a pleasure working with you guys.
Thank you. Lynn?
All of the people who are watching this in your caucus ought to know that these two, Scott and Stephanie, are on speed dial for me. You know, when there was a problem with school board, I call them and say, can you speak at our DEC? Can you help with the training? Can you do whatever? They are there all the time. They're driving all over the place, and they are such great representatives of this caucus. I am so grateful to be able to have them as mentors and helping me get through this first cycle and you know, Seminole County. So I am just beyond, you know, proud of the work that they do. And your members ought to know that you guys are all over the place, and it is really
Amazing.
impressive what you do. So I also would just like to say that there's hope, you know, for those people who are in red counties, those people who are candidates who are thinking of running. Don't be scared off. The money thing might sound like it's overwhelming. It's not. There's hope. You know, your DEC will help you. And you will be able to, you know, to make a difference in the lives of the students where you live. So it is so important that everybody who is common sense and who wants to put their toe in the water in politics, this is a great place to start. And I hope that I hope that we didn't scare you at all from taking the plunge and from being a candidate, because there are lots of great resources. This caucus is one of them. And just hats off to you for voting and for being Democrats and for standing up for the kids in public school here across the state.
And before I give it to Stephanie, I want to say, like, thank you, Lynn and JoAnne. We've learned more than we've taught, I believe. So, but that's the way it's supposed to work, right? We learn and make each other's ideas even better. So thank you. Stephanie, you get to wrap us up.
I was just going to say, I mean, thank you so much to both of you, Lynn and JoAnne. I have learned so much from you, and I'm just so thankful for your guidance, for your candidates, and for your counties, just your guidance and your patience. I know that patience at times was trying at times, but you were patient and you guided them well, and you were so helpful. And I know they appreciate that. And I know that I do. And so thank you for that. And I just also, as you know, as going through this season, I mean, I leave so inspired by the candidates that we have been able to meet, because you know, we have gone and talked to people face to face and learned, you know, why people are running. And there are so many good candidates out there who are in it for the right reasons. And they worked so hard, and they've connected with so many people. And I don't know, I you know, it didn't result in a win for everybody, but I'm so grateful that there are people, especially in this political climate right now, that are willing to get out there and throw their hat in the ring and push the issues that are important and give it their all. So thank you to everyone who did that, and I'm very thankful for the two of you as well.
Oh, thank you.
So I think that will wrap up. We were doing a whole bunch of Facebook Lives like almost every week, and we had a whole bunch of them planned, and then like campaign season just hit us over the head with all the travel. We're gonna try doing, for everyone out there in Facebook Live land, or if you watch this later on YouTube, we're going to try to do one a month, and I think it's going to be like the first Tuesday of the month. Seems to be a good time, and we'll download this so people can watch it whenever they want on YouTube. But let people know we have ideas for the next couple of months. I think this was a great, necessary, fascinating discussion about the results from primary night, and it's a way to boost us in the future, whether it's over the next couple of months before November 8th, or getting us ready for 23 and 24. We're already thinking about 24. So come back in October, first Tuesday of the month. We'll make an announcement on the guest. JoAnne, Lynn, Stephanie, thank you for participating tonight. And don't go anywhere. I'm going to end the live stream, but once we're out, we could kind of debrief with the four of us. But everyone in Facebook Live land, thank you. Have a good night.